Mom, my daughter Chloe said, her voice all gentle and concerned, Ben and I have put together a household alignment proposal. I just stared at the laminated spreadsheet her husband slid across my breakfast table. My table, in my condo. We really need to get on the same page about your financial contributions. My financial contributions? I worked 40 years as an RN for this home, for this piece. And now, my own daughter was handing me a corporate-style proposal in my own kitchen, looking at me like I was a tenant who was late on rent. That moment was the breaking point, but the foundation had been cracking for months. To understand how I went from being mom to a financial problem in my own home, we need to go back 60 days to the morning they first showed up with all their luggage and a temporary problem. 60 days ago, that temporary problem looked a lot like a U-Haul trailer hitched to the back of a dented Subaru, blocking the community mown grass right in front of my condo. Chloe had called me from somewhere in New Mexico, crying. It was the kind of sobbing, breathless call I hadn't heard since she was a teenager and broke up with her high school boyfriend. Mom, Ben's startup. It didn't get its funding. We lost everything. They're locking us out of the apartment. Ben's startup in California. For the last 5 years, it had been Ben's startup. It was always about to get a Series A round, or was pivoting, or was pre-revenue. It had all the buzzwords of success, but none of the results. And now, that bubble had finally burst. We have nowhere to go, Mom. Nowhere. We just need a month, 30 days, just to get on our feet. What mother says no? I'm a nurse. My entire life has been about fixing things, about patching wounds, about seeing a crisis and handling it. Of course. I'd said, my voice calm, already mentally converting my craft room back into the guest room. You come here, you rest. We'll figure it out. The first few weeks, it was almost nice. The condo, so quiet since my husband passed, was suddenly full of life. Chloe would help me cook, and Ben would talk, with great booming confidence, about the incompetence of the venture capitalists who had failed him. But 30 days is a funny thing. It's a line that looks solid from a distance, but when you get up close, it's made of sand. Just till we get on our feet. Slowly turned into them getting very, very comfortable on my feet. Ben's job hunt consisted of him taking his laptop down to the community pool cabana, wearing expensive athletic gear, and networking for 6 hours, which looked a lot like napping and taking calls. Chloe, too traumatized by the financial trauma to work, focused on de-stressing. Her de-stressing involved household trips to Costco and Whole Foods. My credit card, which I'd offered for groceries, was suddenly supporting a lifestyle I didn't even have. I'm a simple woman. I buy the store brand. But now, my pantry was overflowing with $40 bottles of imported olive oil, organic bison, and cases of sparkling water I wouldn't dare touch. It was a slow creep, an IV drip of disrespect, so subtle you barely notice it until the bag is empty and your arm is cold. Until I woke up on day 60 this morning and found they had scheduled a family meeting. And that brings us back to my quartz countertop, back to the laminated spreadsheet. Ben cleared his throat, tapping the document like a professor. Evelyn, he said, calling me by my first name, we've outlined a new financial framework for the household. This proposal creates transparency. I looked at the columns. My eyes, trained to read a patient's chart in seconds, scanned the text. Column 1 read, Evelyn's contributions. It listed, lodging equity, est, value, $450,000. Monthly pension income, $4,200. Column 2 green, Chloe and Ben's contributions. It listed household management and logistics, daily companionship and anti-isolation services, youthful energy and vitality, brand alignment. I had to read that last one twice. Youthful energy. They were literally charging me for not being lonely. Mom, think of it as a family co-op, Chloe chimed in, placing her hand on mine. We're all contributing what we can. You have the assets. We have the time and the energy to manage them. It's symbiotic. Then, Ben pointed to the last page. The action plan. It was simple. It proposed my $4,200 monthly pension be direct deposited into their new joint household account. From this, they would manage all the bills, my mortgage, which I'd paid off in 2010, the HOA fees, the utilities, and then They would give me a personal stipend of $300 a month. For incidentals. I just stared at that line. Personal stipend, $300. I carefully, slowly, set my coffee mug down on the counter. The heavy ceramic made a sharp clink against the stone. It was the only sound in the room. It felt like the only protest I had left in me. I was looking at them, but I wasn't seeing them. I was seeing the view out my patio window, the one I'd paid for the pristine, manicured green of the 18th hole of our 55-plus community golf course. This view cost me. I wasn't seeing the golf course. I was back in the ER at St. Jude's 1995, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic, burnt coffee, and something metallic I knew was blood. I was 40 years old, 14 hours into a 16-hour double shift, my feet so swollen in my nursing clogs I could barely feel them. I was holding a pressure dressing on a screaming man's femoral artery, his blood hot on my hands, whispering, "You are okay, you are safe," while my own daughter was at home with a babysitter. I missed Christmases for this condo. I missed Thanksgivings. I worked weekends and holidays and flu epidemics, wiping brows and bodies and everything in between to earn my pension, to earn my peace, to earn this very quartz countertop they were now using to serve me my own financial execution. And they wanted to give me a stipend. Chloe must have sensed my silence. She mistook my white-hot, silent rage for hesitation, for consideration. She barreled ahead, her voice bright and false. "And Mom, that's not even the best part. This financial alignment, it lets us finally launch our passion project." Ben straightened up, his CEO voice returning. "We're launching Palm Vista Wellness, a holistic, curated life coaching brand. Chloe is the empath, I'm the visionary." "And that's why," Chloe said, her smile so wide it looked like a threat, "we need to take over the master bedroom." The air left my lungs. "The light in there is just so much better for filming our content," Ben explained, as if this were perfectly reasonable. "And the ensuite. It's just a better look for our brand when we're talking to clients. The guest room is perfectly fine for you, right? It's cozier." Cozier. That's what you call a closet when you're trying to sell it. They weren't just taking my money. They were taking my room, my space. The room my husband, Mark, and I had shared. The room where I still kept his reading glasses on the nightstand. I felt the walls closing in. I couldn't breathe. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the tile. I have to get my mail. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking, and walked out into the blinding Arizona sun. I didn't care about the mail. I just needed to escape the smell of my own home, which suddenly smelled like them. I was halfway to the community mailbox kiosk when I heard my name. Evelyn. It was Frank Rossetti, our HOA board president. A 70-something, no-nonsense retired Marine who wore a Semper Fi hat and walked the community perimeter every morning. "Morning, Frank," I managed to say, shielding my eyes. He nodded. "All business. Evelyn, I gotta be frank." He loved that joke. "Your guests." My blood ran cold. They had 6, 7 people at the pool cabana yesterday. Looked like a sales pitch. Heard him talking about investment tiers and wellness journeys. "This isn't a timeshare, Evelyn." "Oh, Frank," I stammered. "That's just my son-in-law, Ben. He's just—" "I don't care if it's the Pope, Evelyn." Frank cut me off, not unkindly. "This is a 5 and over community, not a business park. We have CC&Rs, you know that. That pool is for residents, not for a commercial operation. It's a direct violation." He pointed a thick finger toward my condo. "I'm just giving you the friendly heads up before the board sends the formal warning. First one's a letter, second one's a fine, third one, we start talking liens. A lien on my home. Get a handle on it, Evelyn," he said, softening just a bit. "People are talking." He nodded again and continued his walk. I stood there on the hot pavement, the desert sun baking my scalp. The letter in my hand was just a coupon for a local car wash, but I was clutching it like a lifeline. Frank thought he was handing me a problem. He had no idea. He had just handed me the solution. They wanted to talk about boundaries and rules. Fine. A small, cold smile touched my lips. Let's talk about the ones written in steel. I stood there, my hand gripping the counter, my knuckles white. They were still talking. Ben was using terms like value add and financial optimization. And Chloe was nodding, her face a mask of serene, therapeutic concern. But I wasn't listening. I couldn't hear their words. All I could hear was the sharp, echoing clink my coffee mug had made against the quartz. It was the sound of something hard hitting something solid, the sound of a line being drawn. They saw me as a problem to be managed, a resource to be aligned, an old woman in a floral bathrobe, staring blankly at their spreadsheet. They didn't see me. They had no idea who I was. My eyes drifted past them, past their laminated proposal, to the sliding glass door, to the view beyond, the golf course. When Mark and I first looked at this place, that view was what sold me. The 18th hole. It wasn't just grass. It was peace. It was the color of quiet. It was a long, green, manicured promise that all the hard years, all the noise, all the chaos, was finally over. My husband Mark, he'd given me this little pin when I graduated from nursing school, just a tiny gold caduceus. He'd said, "Evelyn, you're a fixer. Just promise me you'll remember to fix yourself a good life, too." He died just 2 years after we moved in. 2 years of this peace together. And for the 12 years since, I have held on to this condo, this view, like it was the last piece of him. It was the good life he wanted for me. It was the good life I had earned for us. And this view cost me. It cost me Christmases, it cost me Thanksgivings, it cost me birthday parties and school plays. I wasn't seeing the golf course. I was seeing the gray, flickering fluorescent light of the St. Jude's emergency room, 1995. The air was a toxic cocktail of smells, burnt coffee, rubbing alcohol, unwashed bodies, and the sharp metallic tang of blood that you never, ever get used to. My feet felt like 2 bags of hot cement, swollen and aching inside my nursing clogs. I was 22 hours into what was supposed to be a 16-hour double shift, covering for a girl who'd called in with the flu. We were 3 nurses short, and the waiting room was a sea of misery. I was 40 years old. Chloe was 10. She had a recital that night. I'd had the costume, a little blue sequin number, laid out on her bed. I'd promised I'd be there. I promised. But at 7 p.m., a multi-car pileup came in from the freeway, and you don't leave. You just don't. You wash your hands, you pull on a new pair of gloves, and you get back to work. I remember holding a pressure dressing on a man's leg, my entire arm shaking from exhaustion, while Dr. Ramirez yelled for a type O negative line. I didn't get home until 4 a.m. The little sequined costume was still on the bed. Chloe was asleep, and her pillow was damp. That's what this golf course cost. I was seeing my old Honda Civic, the one with 200,000 miles, parked in the hospital garage. I was seeing myself eat a cold tuna sandwich my dinner at 2, zero image of a nurse's hectic break room, a.m. under that one buzzing light, reading a textbook for my recertification. I was seeing myself come home, my back one solid knot of pain, to find Chloe and her friends had left the kitchen a disaster, and I just cleaned it, in silence, because I was too tired to fight and too proud to complain. I worked 40 years. 40 years of night shifts that destroyed your sleep schedule. 40 years of holidays, smiling at weeping families while my own family was at home opening presents without me. 40 years of holding the hands of strangers as they died. 40 years of literal blood, sweat, and tears. I did it for my pension. I did it for my 401. I did it for the day I could finally hang up my scrubs, put my nursing badge in a drawer, and sit right here, in this chair, and drink my coffee in silence. I did it so I would never be a burden, so I would always be independent, so I would never have to ask my children for a single dime. And now, my child, my daughter, who I put through college, whose wedding I paid for, whose first apartment I co-signed for, was standing in my kitchen, in my sanctuary, telling me my life's work was lodging equity. She was telling me that my reward for 40 years of service was a $300 personal stipend, like I was a teenager being given an allowance, like I was a child, like I was a problem. Ben was saying something about cash flow and assets. He was pointing to the spreadsheet. "Evelyn, you're not seeing the big picture. You're house rich and cash poor. We're helping you liquidate your value. Liquidate my value. I'd held a man's heart in my hand. I'd literally breathed life into a blue-faced newborn. And this man-child who'd never held a real job, who'd failed at every startup he'd ever touched, was going to explain value to me. The rage was so cold, so pure, it was almost peaceful. It cleared my head. They didn't see a 6-8-year-old retired nurse who had run an ER trauma bay with nothing but 2 orderlies and a prayer. They saw a little old lady, a dove, ready to be plucked. They had no idea what I was. They had no idea that a good nurse is also a master of triage. We know how to assess a wound. We know how to stop the bleeding. And we know, with ice-cold precision, how to cut off the part that's become toxic before the infection spreads and kills the whole body. I turned back from the window. I looked at the spreadsheet, this laminated insult, this household alignment proposal. I smiled, the same calm, professional smile I'd given 1,000 screaming patients, the "I'm in control and everything will be okay" smile, which, in the ER, usually meant I was about to stick you with a very large needle. "You know, Chloe," I said, my voice quiet, "you're right. It is time we started setting some healthy boundaries." Chloe beamed, and the relief was so total it almost made me sick. My agreement was exactly what she wanted to hear, but she had completely, fatally misunderstood which boundary I was talking about. She saw my vague agreement as a green light, a surrender. "Oh, Mom, I knew you'd understand," she gushed, her voice high and relieved. "You've always been so supportive. We just needed to get on the same page." Ben let out a gust of air, his CEO mask relaxing into a smug smile. "Exactly, Evelyn. Alignment. That's what this is all about. Now we can really start moving." "And Mom," Chloe said, clapping her hands together, her eyes shining with that manic self-help glow she'd had ever since she met Ben. "That's not even the best part. This financial alignment, it frees us up to finally launch our passion project." Ben stood up and began to pace my kitchen, his energy suddenly expansive, invasive. He was a man who didn't just walk into a room, he consumed it. "We're launching Palm Vista Wellness," he announced, as if he were addressing a stadium, not a 6-8-year-old woman in a bathrobe. "A holistic, curated, high-touch life coaching brand. Chloe is the empath, I'm the visionary." I just stared at him. A visionary, I thought. "Ben, the last thing you visioned was a crypto scam that got you evicted from your California apartment." I kept my face as smooth and blank as a fresh hospital sheet. "A business," I said, my voice flat. "Here." "It's perfect, Mom," Chloe chimed in, practically vibrating. "This community is our target demographic. It's a gold mine. All these retired, successful people with disposable income just waiting for someone to help them find their third act purpose. We can use the community yoga room for our mindfulness sessions, the pool cabanas for our vision boarding workshops." I felt a cold prickle on my neck. The pool cabanas, the yoga room, those were community property. Those were for residents. For Frank, the HOA president, to play cards in. For my friend Susan to do her water aerobics. Not for this. Ben stopped his pacing and looked around my kitchen, his gaze critical. He scanned my comfortable cherrywood cabinets, my older model appliances, my little collection of ceramic birds on the windowsill, and his lip curled. Just a little. Just enough. "The thing is, Evelyn," he said, "to attract high-net-worth clients, we have to project a high-net-worth brand. And, well..." He gestured vaguely at my life. Chloe, as always, rushed in to translate his insult. "What Ben means," she said, in that gentle therapeutic tone she used when she was about to be unbelievably cruel, "is that we need a dedicated, professional space for filming our content, for our Zoom calls with clients. And that's why," Ben said, dropping the bomb like it was a casual suggestion, "we need to take over the master bedroom." The world stopped. The hum of my refrigerator, a sound I hadn't noticed in 12 years, was suddenly the only thing I could hear. The ticking of the little clock over my stove. Tick-tock. My room. Not just a room. My room. The room that still smelled faintly of Mark's Old Spice after all these years because I kept his wooden dresser valet on my nightstand. The room where our heavy, king-size cherrywood bed, the first real piece of furniture we ever bought together after 20 years of hand-me-downs, still stood. The room where, on that nightstand under the lamp, sat his reading glasses. A simple, wire-rimmed pair, sitting right where he'd left them after finishing the Sunday crossword, the day before he went into the hospital. I'd never moved them. Sometimes, at night, when the silence got too loud, I'd just touch them, run my finger over the cool wireframe, my little ritual, my way of saying goodnight. And that was the room they wanted. That was the nightstand Ben would dump his car keys and his wallet on. That was the sanctuary they planned to fill with their ring lights, their whiteboards, their tripods, and their youthful energy. They were going to turn my private, sacred grief into a film set. Chloe saw the look on my face. She knew. A daughter knows. She knew exactly what she was asking for, and she did it anyway. "Mom, just think about it," she said, her voice dropping. "The light in there is just so much better for filming. That big bay window, it's perfect. It gives us that authentic, natural feel. And the ensuite, it's just a better look for our brand when we're talking to clients. You understand, right? Image is everything." I said nothing. I couldn't. I was a nurse. I'd seen gunshot wounds. I'd seen car wrecks. I'd seen things that would make a person's skin crawl. But this was a new kind of violation. A cold, precise, emotional evisceration. "The guest room is perfectly fine for you, right?" Ben added, already mentally moving my furniture. "It's cozier." Cozier. The word hung in the air. Putrid. Cozier. The word you use for a 10x10 space with one small window that faces the neighbor's trash cans and the droning air conditioning units. The word you use for a closet when you're trying to sell it. "Mom, don't look like that," Chloe said, and now her voice was laced with disappointment. She was disappointed in me. This isn't a punishment. It's a reallocation of resources. We're all in this together, remember? This business is for the family. When we're successful, everyone benefits. You'll be so proud of us." "Proud," I whispered. The word tasted like ash. "Exactly," Ben said, completely missing the ice in my voice. "This is a win-win. You get to be part of a thriving modern family enterprise. We'll even list you as founder and senior advisor on the website." Founder. Advisor. I was being demoted from owner to a fake honorary title in my own home. The air in the kitchen was thick and suffocating. I felt a wave of nausea. I couldn't look at them. I couldn't look at the spreadsheet. I certainly couldn't look at the doorway down the hall, the one to my room, which was now, apparently, a future content studio. My hands were shaking, not with fear, with a rage so profound, so pure, it was almost dizzying. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. "Where are you going?" Chloe asked, her empath voice suddenly sharp, annoyed that I was breaking her script, that I wasn't playing the part of the grateful, cozy little old lady. I have to get the mail," I managed to say. The words came out strained, tight. "Mom, we're trying to have a serious family discussion," Ben said, his tone full of executive disappointment, as if I were a rebellious employee. "I just need some air." I walked out. I didn't grab my purse. I didn't even grab my walking shoes. I just walked out the front door, my flimsy slippers slapping on the hot stone walkway. I walked out into the blinding 100-degree Arizona sun, not caring about the mail, not caring about anything except the need to breathe. I just needed to breathe, to think, to escape the smell of my own home, which suddenly, horribly, smelled of their entitlement. I had no idea that my walk for air was about to lead me straight to the one man who would, without even knowing it, hand me the very weapon I needed. I wasn't just walking. I was fleeing. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the little silver key into the lock for mailbox 14B. I fumbled it, dropping it onto the hot pavement with a clink. "Useless," I whispered to myself, bending to retrieve it. Just useless. "Evelyn." The voice was sharp, not unkind, but full of gravel. It cut right through my fog of panic and self-pity. I straightened up, clutching the hot key, and turned. Frank Rossetti. Frank was our HOA board president. He was in his late 70s, built like a sun-baked brick, and was never, ever seen without his red Semper Fi baseball cap pulled low. He was a retired Marine who walked the community perimeter every morning at 0600, his back rigid, checking for overgrown weeds and loose paving stones. Frank was, in a word, order. "Morning, Frank," I managed to say, pulling my thin floral bathrobe tighter. I must have looked a sight, wild-eyed, sweating, in my slippers with no doubt crazy hair. He didn't smile. He wasn't a smiler. He just nodded, his eyes all business. Evelyn, I gotta be frank. He used that line every time, and every time he meant it. Your guests. My blood, which had been boiling with rage, turned to ice. What about them? They had 6, 7 people down at the pool cabana yesterday. 4 p.m. Looked like a sales pitch to me. Oh, Frank, I stammered, a wave of shame washing over me. That's just my son-in-law, Ben. He's just networking. He's in wellness and… Frank held up a calloused hand. The stop signal. I don't care if it's the Pope, Evelyn. This is Palm Vista. This is a 5-5 and over community, not a business park. He tapped a thick finger on the side of the mailbox kiosk, right next to the framed, sun-faded list of rules. We have covenants, conditions, and restrictions. CC and Rs. You know that. That pool is for residents and their personal guests, not for a commercial operation. It's a direct violation of Article 5. Article 5. Commercial operation. Violation. The words were cold, clinical, legal. They were so different from the vague, emotional, toxic language Chloe and Ben used. I'm giving you the friendly heads up, Evelyn, Frank continued, his voice dropping a fraction. I'm doing this neighbor to neighbor, before the board has to send the formal warning letter. Because I like you. He let that hang in the air. First one is a letter, he said, ticking off fingers. Second one is a fine, $500. Third one, we start talking liens. A lien. On my home. On the home I had paid off in 2D10, the home they were threatening to fine me for because of their passion project. The injustice was so complete, so profound, it was almost perfect. It was a perfect, crystalline moment of clarity. Get a handle on it, Evelyn, Frank said, and his eyes softened, just a fraction. He probably thought I was just old, embarrassed, and being taken advantage of. 2 out of 3 wasn't bad. People are talking. He gave a sharp, military-style nod, as if to say, dismissed, then turned on his heel and continued his patrol, his back a rigid line of absolute certainty. I just stood there in the baking sun, the hot metal key clutched in my fist. My hand had stopped shaking. My head was suddenly completely clear. The hornets were gone. Frank thought he was handing me a problem. He thought he was delivering a warning. He had no idea. He had just handed me the solution. He had just handed me my sword and shield. They wanted to talk about rules and alignment and boundaries. Fine. They brought a laminated spreadsheet. I was about to bring the bylaws. I walked back into my condo, the hot key, a lump of steel in my bathrobe pocket. Bylaws. When I stepped inside, the blast of the air conditioning I paid for hit me. They were huddled over Ben's laptop at my kitchen table, the one I'd inherited from my mother. They were scrolling through some website, pointing at sleek, minimalist furniture. That one, Ben said. That white leather one. That's the brand, Chloe. That says 7-figure coach. They were already spending my money, redecorating my room. They were so busy dividing up the spoils of my life, they didn't even notice the look on my face. You okay, Mom? You were gone for a while, Chloe asked, her eyes never leaving the laptop screen. Just needed to clear my head, I said. My voice was calm. It was the same voice I used in the ER when a patient was crashing, the I'm in control voice. I didn't go back to the kitchen. I walked past them, down the short hall to the little built-in desk where I paid my bills. This was my station, my corner of order. Behind my checkbook and the box of thank you cards on the bottom shelf was the binder. It was white, 3-ringed, and at least 3 inches thick. The spine, in faded gold lettering, said, Palm Vista 55 plus community, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. I pulled it out. It was heavy. It felt like a book of law. It was a book of law, my law. I sat down at the desk. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't need one. I'm a nurse. You don't spend 40 years reading doctors' illegible chicken scratch, deciphering complex medication interactions on a 12-page patient chart, and triaging a full-blown crisis at 3:00 a.m. without learning how to find the one critical piece of information that matters. You learn to read the fine print. You learn to follow protocol. My home, my patient was in critical condition. The symptoms were Chloe and Ben. The infection was their passion project. This binder. This was the treatment plan. I opened it to the table of contents. My hands, which had been shaking by the mailboxes, were now perfectly steady. My eyes scanned the list. Article 1. Article 2. I found it. Article 5. Commercial use. My finger traced the line. I turned to page 48. I didn't need to skim. I read every word. Any commercial, professional, business, or other non-residential activity is strictly prohibited within any residential unit or common area. I opened my desk drawer and took out a bright pink highlighter. I pressed the felt tip to the page and drew a single, clean, fluorescent line. Click. I capped the pen. That was Frank's warning. That was the fine. That was my shield. But I wasn't just looking for a shield. I was a nurse, yes, but I was also my mother's daughter. I was looking for the scalpel. I went back to the index. Article 7. Occupancy. Page 62. All permanent residents of a residential unit must meet the age requirement of 55 years or older. Ben was 38. Chloe was 35. My. They weren't residents. They weren't even allowed to be permanent residents. So, what were they? I found my answer in Article 9, Guest Policy. Any guest of a resident is limited to a stay of not more than 30 consecutive days. 30 days. They had been here 60. Click. A second pink line, sharp and bright. Click. A third. Article 5, Commercial Use. Article 7, 55 plus occupancy. Article 9, 30-day guest limit. 3 violations. 3 hard, legal, ironclad, unarguable facts. Not boundaries. Not feelings. Not alignment. Rules. I closed the binder. The heavy thud of the cover echoed in the quiet hallway. It was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in months. They had their laminated spreadsheet. I had my 3 pink lines. This was no longer a family problem to be managed. It was a compliance issue to be enforced. I had my diagnosis. I had my treatment plan. All I had to do now was let them show me the final, critical symptom. I had a feeling I wouldn't have to wait very long. I didn't have to wait long. I sat there at my small desk. The heavy HOA binder closed on the blotter. It felt like a shield. I was a nurse on watch, the quiet shift, just observing the patient's vitals before the code was called. I was calm. That's the part that scared me. The anger had burned away, leaving something cold, hard, and clear. All I needed was the final, critical symptom. A few hours later, I heard the rumble of the garage door. My garage door. The one I usually kept closed. They hadn't just gone out for milk. They had been gone for hours, ever since I'd walked back in from my talk with Frank. I heard the car engine cut off, the thunk of car doors, and then a rattling. A heavy, industrial rattling. I walked to the door that led from my kitchen to the garage. Ben was shouting, "No, pivot it, Chloe, pivot it, you're going to scratch the wall." "It's heavy, Ben." "Just, let me get the dolly." I opened the door and just stood there, my hand on the knob. The garage was filled. My little sedan was parked on the street, and in its place was Ben's dented Subaru, trunk wide open, spilling out a mountain of stuff. And Ben was wrestling a massive, flat-screen TV box off a red flatbed cart. A Costco cart. "Oh, hey, Evelyn," Ben said, grunting. The box was enormous. A 70-inch, 4K, smart television. "Give us a hand, will ya?" "Grab the end." I didn't move. "What is all this?" Chloe popped out from behind the box, her face flushed and shiny with excitement. "Mom, we did it! We invested!" We had a huge breakthrough at the household alignment meeting, and Ben said, "We have to strike while the iron is hot." So we did. We went to the Costco Business Center. They wheeled the giant box past me into my pristine, quiet living room. It smelled of styrofoam, new plastic, and, I don't know, arrogance. They set it down right in the middle of the floor, blocking the view to my patio, to my golf course. "This," Ben announced, patting the box like he'd just won it on a game show, "is for the studio. We need it for our client presentations and for streaming the wellness seminars we'll be hosting." Studio. There it was. He'd said it out loud. Not your room, not the master, the studio. They had already evicted me. They had already painted over my life. But they weren't done. "Don't just stand there, Chloe," Ben barked. "Let's get the desk." They went back into the garage. I followed, a silent ghost in my own home. They were pulling a long, flat-packed box from the Subaru. It was a cheap, white particle board desk, the kind that looked modern and minimalist on a website, the kind that would be a perfect, sterile slab for their laptops and their visions. This was it. This was the replacement for Mark's dresser valet. This was the altar they were building to themselves, and they were going to put it right where my husband's reading glasses still sat. And for the brand, Chloe trilled, pulling out a massive high-end blender. For our morning vitality smoothies, we can't be Palm Vista Wellnesses and be using your, you know. She gestured at my perfectly good, 10-year-old Osterizer. They piled it all in my living room, turning my calm, quiet space into a warehouse. The 70-inch TV, the flat-packed white visionary desk, the $500 blender, 2 giant 36 packs of expensive, glass-bottled sparkling water, a conference-grade whiteboard, even a sleek, chrome and plastic office chair. It was a complete startup package. A startup they had no money for. A startup they were building inside my home, like a cuckoo bird laying its eggs in another bird's nest. I just watched. I was invisible. I was just the housekeeper who was witnessing the new tenants move in. Ben, sweating and triumphant, ripped the last piece of tape off the office chair box. He wiped his hands on his expensive athletic shorts. "See," he said to Chloe, ignoring me. "That's how you build a business. You act like a business." "You're amazing, Ben," Chloe cooed, kissing his sweaty cheek. Then, he finally turned to me. He had that magnanimous, no-big-deal look on his face. The look of a generous boss who's just letting you in on the big, exciting plan. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a comically long, flimsy piece of paper. The Costco receipt. He held it out to me. Not with an, "I'm sorry," not with a, "Can we talk about this?" He just held it out. "Go ahead and pay this from your account, Evelyn," he said, his voice casual. "It's all household essentials. For the business." I took the receipt. It was still warm from his body. I unrolled it. My eyes, the eyes of a nurse trained to read a patient's vitals at a glance, scanned the total. $2,548.17. $2,548.17. Household essentials. A 70-inch television. A white desk to replace my husband's memory. "It's for the business, Mom," Chloe said quickly, seeing the look on my face and, as always, misreading it. "It's a write-off. We're building our brand just like we discussed. You can't make money if you don't look like money, right?" $2,500. That was more than half of my monthly pension. It was 6 months of my $300 stipend. This was the final symptom, the one I'd been waiting for. The moment the infection declared itself, no longer hiding in the bloodstream, but showing itself in a full-blown raging fever. This wasn't just arrogance. This wasn't just entitlement. This was theft. They had just handed me, with a confident smile, the proof of their own crime. I looked at the receipt. I looked at the mountain of cardboard in my living room. I looked at their 2 smiling, expectant, predatory faces. And I folded the receipt. Once. Twice. Very neatly. I slid it into the pocket of my bathrobe. It nestled in beside the hot metal mailbox key. "Okay," I said. Just that one word. Ben and Chloe visibly relaxed. A shared sigh. The old woman had caved. The alignment was complete. "Great," Ben said, clapping his hands together. "Now, let's get this TV into the studio. Evelyn, you're going to have to move your stuff out of the master by tonight. We've got a lot of work to do." I just nodded again. Okay. They saw my nod as weakness, as surrender. They had no idea. It was the final piece of evidence. It was the okay a surgeon gives when they've seen the X-ray and they know exactly where they need to cut. Ben was already grunting, his hands on the giant 70-inch TV box, getting ready to shove it toward my hallway. "Okay, Evelyn," he said, not even looking at me, his voice sharp with annoyance. "Seriously, we need to get that junk out of the master by tonight. We've got a lot of work to do." Junk. My husband's reading glasses, his dresser valet, the heavy solid wood bed we bought with our first real bonus, my memories. He called them junk. That was it. That was the final needle, the one that pushes the last fatal drop of medicine into the line. The rage, which had been a cold, clear ice in my veins, flashed hot. But when I spoke, my voice was just as cold as before. The voice of a charge nurse at 3 a.m. The "I'm in control here" voice. "Actually, Ben," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the sound of ripping cardboard. He stopped, mid-grunt. Chloe, who was pulling the $500 blender from its packaging, paused. They both turned and looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time that day. They saw me. Not the housekeeper. Not the resource. They saw the 6-8-year-old woman in the floral bathrobe who was in their way. Their faces were pure annoyance. "What now, Evelyn?" Ben sighed, wiping his sweaty forehead with the back of his hand. I held up the long, flimsy Costco receipt, the one for $2,548.17. "You asked me to pay this," I said, "and I've been reviewing your household alignment proposal." A flicker of something crossed their faces. Smugness. They thought I was going to negotiate. They thought I was going to cry and beg them to lower my stipend or maybe ask for a payment plan for their TV. They thought I was finally going to play the game on their laminated spreadsheet. "And?" Chloe asked, crossing her arms. She was trying to look patient, like a therapist dealing with a difficult child. "Did you have some thoughts you wanted to share?" "I did," I said. I walked past them, past the mountain of their entitlement in my living room. I walked to my small, orderly desk in the hallway. I placed the Costco receipt on the blotter. "You gave me your proposal." I opened the heavy 3-inch thick HOA binder, and I have a counter proposal. Tucked inside the front cover, there were 2 crisp, white, letter-sized envelopes. My hand, the one that had held screaming newborns and dying men, was perfectly steady. I'd spent an hour at the little UPS store in the strip mall, the one with the notary. It was the best $20 I'd spent in a decade. I turned back to them. I held out the envelopes, one for Chloe, one for Ben. They just stared at them. "What is this, Mom?" Chloe asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "A check. Are you finally paying the Costco bill?" "It's my counterproposal," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "Go on, open it. It's for the alignment of the household." Ben snatched his envelope first. He ripped it open with an aggressive, tearing sound. Chloe, more hesitant, slid her fingernail under the flap. I watched their faces. It was the most satisfying thing I had seen in 2 years. Ben's eyes scanned the page. His CEO mask just melted. The smugness evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed, reddish confusion. What is this? Is this a joke?" Chloe's reaction was slower. She was reading the words one by one, her lips moving. This is a legal letter. Notice 2. Mom, what is this?" Ben looked up from the paper, his eyes wide and suddenly, truly, panicked. "Vacate? Vacate the premises." I just stood there, my hands clasped behind my back. "It's a 30-day notice to vacate," I said, my voice as clear and sterile as a new scalpel. "As per Article 9, Section 2 of the Community Bylaws." A terrible silence filled the room. The only sound was the high-pitched whine of the new blender, which Chloe had plugged in and forgotten to turn off. You can't," Chloe stammered. Her face was crumpling. The tears were coming. "Oh, I knew those tears. Those were the 'I didn't get the car I wanted' tears. The 'I'm in trouble' tears." They weren't sad. They were furious. "Mom, how could you? We're your family." "This is a joke," Ben repeated, but the words were hollow. He was waving the paper, this notarized, legally binding document, as if it were one of his worthless spreadsheets. "You can't kick us out! We're tenants! We have rights." "No," I said. I stepped forward. "This is where you're wrong." I walked over to the HOA binder on my desk. I opened it to the first bright pink highlighted line. "You are not tenants," I said, my voice rising, not with anger but with power. "Tenants pay rent. You haven't paid a dime. You are guests, and according to Article 9, your 30-day guest limit expired 30 days ago." Ben's face went from red to a strange, blotchy purple. You can't. I'll sue you. I'll sue this whole stupid community." "For what?" I asked. For enforcing the rules you're breaking? Besides, who are you going to sue with, Ben? You can't even pay for your own $500 blender. I flipped the page in the binder. Click. And then there's Article 7. All permanent residents must be 55 years or older. You're 38, Ben. You're 35, Chloe. You can't legally live here, even if I wanted you to, which I don't. Mom, Chloe wailed, you're doing this over some stupid rules? We're your blood. We're building a business. We're trying to get on our feet. A business, I said, and I smiled. This one was not calm. It was a cold, sharp baring of teeth. Oh, this is my favorite part. I flipped the page again. Click. Article 5. All commercial operations are strictly prohibited. Frank Rossetti, the HOA president, sends his regards. He loved your poolside seminar yesterday. He's very, very interested in your passion project. In fact, he was this close to fining me $5,000 for it. He was talking about a lien. I let that word hang in the air. Lien. Ben's face went white, the color of his new, flat-packed desk. He knew that word. That was a real word, not synergy, not alignment. Lien. So you see, I said, walking toward them, you're not just unwelcome guests. You are a liability. You are a direct financial legal threat to my home. And as a nurse, I've been trained my entire life. When you find an infection, you cut it out. Ben looked at the TV. He looked at the desk. He looked at me. And in his eyes, I saw the rat-like panic of a con man who just realized the mark was holding all the cards. He took a step toward the hallway, toward my room. We're not going anywhere, he growled. This is our house, too. We're moving into that studio tonight. He was going to do it. He was going to try and physically push past me. I just stood there. I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. You take one more step toward my bedroom, Ben, I said, my voice a whisper. And I will call Frank, and then I will call the police, and I will show them this. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the Costco receipt. This $2,500 receipt for your commercial operation that's not allowed to exist, that you tried to force me to pay for. I held it up. This isn't a household expense. This is financial elder abuse. That's a crime, Ben. He froze. His foot was halfway in the hall. Chloe just let out a sound, a long, hopeless hiss of air. It was over. They knew it. I knew it. I walked back to my desk and tapped the notarized letter. This is not a proposal. It is not a suggestion. It is a legal 30-day notice to vacate the premises. You have 30 days, starting right now. The silence that followed was absolute. It was louder than any screaming match. The 70-inch TV box stood in the middle of my living room like a tombstone. Ben was still frozen, his foot half raised toward the hallway. Chloe's face, which had been a mask of therapeutic concern, was crumbling. It was collapsing into the ugly, red-splotched face of a child who had just been told no for the first time in their adult life. She was the first to break, and she didn't just break, she shattered. Mom, she whispered, her voice trembling with a rage that was trying and failing to disguise itself as hurt. You can't. This is abusive. The word. That word, she'd used it on me. After 2 months of systematically dismantling my life, after trying to steal my pension and my room, I was the one who was abusive. This is hostile, Mom, she cried, and the tears were real now, hot tears of pure fury. This is an act of aggression. We came to you for help. We are your family. We are your blood. And you're throwing us on the street with some lawyer trick. Ben found his voice, a low, dangerous growl. She's right. This is unbelievable. You're a sick old woman. Hostile, abusive, aggression, sick. They were just words. I'd been called worse on a Tuesday night in the ER. Their words were messy, emotional, and weak. My words were written in stone. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself. I simply turned, walked to my small desk, and picked up the heavy, 3-ring HOA binder. I held it in my hands, not like a weapon, but like a fact, like a patient's chart. Hostile, I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I looked directly at Chloe. I'm not being hostile, dear. I'm being compliant. Ben let out a harsh laugh. Compliant? That's what you call this? You're trying to destroy us. I flipped open the binder. The pages were marked with my bright pink highlighter, as clear and precise as a surgical line. This is not a lawyer trick, Chloe, I said, my voice calm. This is Article 7. All permanent residents must be 55 years or older. You are 35. Ben is 38. I looked up at them. You can't legally live here. You're not residents. You're not even tenants. You're not allowed to be. Chloe's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. The therapy speak had failed her. She had no script for this. "End this," I said, flipping the page with a sharp swoosh, "is Article 9, guest policy. Guests are limited to a stay of not more than 30 consecutive days." I tapped the pink line. "You've been here 60. I looked at Ben. "Your household alignment proposal was a violation from the moment you wrote it." But, Chloe stammered, grabbing at straws. We were just trying to set healthy boundaries. We were trying to help you, to align our finances." "Yes," I said. "You were." I snapped the binder shut. The thud echoed in the room. "And now I'm setting my boundary. My boundary is called Article 5, which says I will not be paying a $5,000 fine for your business. My boundary is called the front door. My boundary is this document, which says I am protecting my property." I held up the heavy binder. "You came to me with a laminated proposal, Ben. I'm coming to you with the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Which one do you think holds up in court?" Ben's face was white, the color of his new, flat-packed desk. He knew, the visionary, the CEO, the man who was all buzzwords and no substance, had just slammed face first into a non-negotiable, legally binding fact. He had no answer. "It's not hostile, Chloe," I said, my voice softening. "Just a fraction." It was the voice of a nurse explaining a terminal diagnosis. "It's the bylaws." I let the silence sit there. I let them suffocate in it. "I am not abusing you," I continued. "I am complying with the rules of this community, the rules I agreed to when I bought this condo, the rules you violated and then tried to make me pay for." I looked at the mountain of Costco boxes. "I am protecting my equity, as you called it. The equity I earned over 40 years of 16-hour shifts. The equity that includes my husband's reading glasses on the nightstand." I locked eyes with Ben, the junk you told me to clear out tonight. His eyes dropped. He couldn't look at me. "You have 30 days, I said again. "Not as mom. As Evelyn, the owner of this property, you have 30 days to get your passion project and your 70-inch television out of my living room. I suggest you get a handle on it." I suggested he get a handle on it. And then I just waited. The silence that landed in the room was a physical thing. It was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a bubble bursting. It was the sound of the real world rushing in to fill the vacuum their arrogance had left. Ben's face was a terrible, blotchy red. He was vibrating, his hands clenched at his sides. He looked from me to the 70-inch TV box, to the notarized letter still clutched in his hand. He was a cornered animal, and he was about to lunge. "You can't," he finally sputtered, the word tearing from his throat. You can't do this. We'll get a lawyer. You'll be hearing from our lawyer. We have tenant rights. You can't just throw people on the street." I didn't even sigh. I'd spent 40 years dealing with panicked, irrational people at 3 a.m. He was just one more. "Go ahead, Ben," I said, my voice as calm as a heart monitor. "Call one. Ask him what tenant rights a 38-year-old man has in a 55-plus, age-restricted community. Ask him what rights a guest who has overstayed his welcome by 30 days has. Ask him," I leaned in, just a fraction. "Ask him if financial elder abuse is a good look for his new client." I pointed to the phone on the wall. "Go on. I'll wait." He just stared at me. His mouth opened, then closed. The visionary was out of visions. The CEO was bankrupt. He had nothing. Chloe just crumpled. She sank onto the arm of my sofa, the one I'd had since 2005, and put her face in her hands. Her shoulders started to shake. But it wasn't the dramatic wail I was used to. It wasn't the "I need" cry. It was a dry, ugly, gasping sob. The sound of someone who had just lost completely. I'd had enough. I was done. I turned my back on them. On their boxes, their blender, their mess. "I'm going to my room," I announced to the chaos. I suggest you start figuring out where you'll be sleeping in 30 days. I walked down the hallway. I didn't run, I walked. I had to step over the flat-packed box of their stupid white visionary desk, which was blocking the way. I stepped into my bedroom. I closed the heavy, solid wood door. And for the first time in 60 days, I turned the lock. The mechanical click of the deadbolt sliding into place was the loudest, most beautiful, most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I sat on the edge of my bed. The room was just as I'd left it, quiet, peaceful, mine. I reached out and touched the cool, wire-rimmed reading glasses on the nightstand. Mark's glasses. "We're okay," I whispered to the empty room. "We're okay." The next 30 days were the longest, quietest war I've ever been a part of. The house, which had been loud with their false confidence and their passion project, was now thick with a toxic, silent resentment. They didn't speak to me, and I didn't speak to them, which was, frankly, a vacation. I'd sit on my patio, drinking my coffee the good, 100% Colombian kind, not their weird-tasting mushroom powder junk, and I'd listen. I'd hear Ben in the kitchen pacing back and forth, his CEO voice replaced by a high, panicked whine. But there has to be a loophole. I heard him hiss into his phone, standing right by the blender that now just gathered dust. "What do you mean, no standing? She's an old woman." He said, "What?" "CC and ours are a non-negotiable contract." "Well, what about—" "No, I can't pay a retainer." Slam. The phone would hit the cradle. A few minutes later, he'd be at it again, presumably with another lawyer who offered a free 15-minute consultation. The visionary was discovering that the real world, the one with lawyers and contracts and actual rules, was not impressed by youthful energy. Chloe, on the other hand, just cried. She'd sit at my kitchen table, her laptop open, not to design a brand or curate a lifestyle, but to Zillow and Apartments.com. I'd walk by to get a glass of water, and I'd hear her sniffling. $2,000, she'd whisper to herself, staring at the screen. "A month? For a one-bedroom inn, Mesa? First, last, and security deposit. Ben, they want $6,000 just to get in. We don't have $6,000. The Palm Vista Wellness brand died without a single client. It died right there in my living room, surrounded by its own unopened boxes. The high point or low point for them was about 2 weeks in. I was reading a novel in my armchair when I heard it. Grunting, scraping, the sound of failure. I looked up. They were taping the 70-inch TV box back up, badly. "Just hold it, Chloe," Ben was yelling, his voice high and panicked. "The tape won't stick. I don't know if they'll take it back. The 90 days isn't up. Just. Don't say anything about the dent in the corner." I watched through my blinds as they wrestled that massive, defeated box out the front door and back into their Subaru, the trunk tied down with a piece of old rope. They were returning it. They weren't just not building their brand, they were actively dismantling it. They were returning their dream to the Costco returns line for a refund. I'm pretty sure I smiled. By the last week, they were selling things. Ben's networking golf clubs showed up on Facebook Marketplace. Chloe's brand-aligned designer purses, the ones I'd probably paid for, were listed on Poshmark. The youthful energy was gone. In its place was the sour, desperate smell of reality. The real world had finally arrived at my doorstep, and it was asking for a security deposit. The U-Haul they rented, the smallest one, a 10-footer, pulled away on the 30th day. I didn't watch from the window. I just stood in my kitchen and listened to the sound of the engine straining under the weight of their failed dreams until it faded down the community road. Then, silence. I stood in the middle of my living room for a long time. The 70-inch TV was gone. The flat-packed visionary desk had been returned, still in its box. The $500 blender, gone. The only things they'd left behind were a small, oily spot on the garage floor from their leaky Subaru and the faint, sour smell of their panic. I walked over and slid my patio door open. The clean, dry scent of the desert, of rosemary bushes and cut grass, rushed in and cleaned it all out. That was 3 months ago. Today, the silence in my condo doesn't feel empty. It feels full. It's the sound of peace. It's the sound of my own thoughts, uninterrupted. It's the sound of me, Evelyn, 68 years old, drinking my coffee the good, 100% Colombian kind I've always loved in my chair, in my living room, with the view of my golf course. I've reclaimed my space. I do water aerobics on Tuesdays with my friend Susan. Frank, the HOA president, gives me a crisp two-finger salute when we pass at the mailboxes. "Good to see you, Evelyn," he said the other day, and there was a knowing respect in his eyes. "Place looks quiet." "It is, Frank," I'd said, smiling. "It is." I'd just gotten home from my class, my hair still damp from the pool, when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen, an unrecognized number from a different area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick it up. "Hello." A pause. A static-filled hesitation. Then, a small, thin voice. "Mom." I stopped, my hand on the kitchen counter. It was Chloe. But it wasn't. The high, bright, false therapy voice was gone. The entitled, condescending empath voice was gone. This voice was. I hadn't heard it in years. It was the voice of my daughter. "Chloe," I said. My voice was even. Not cold, not gushing, just steady. "Hi, Mom." Another pause. I heard a city bus hiss in the background. I hope this is an okay time. "I have a minute." Good. I wanted to. Call. She took a shaky breath. I could picture her, standing on a noisy street corner, not in her yoga pants, but in… what? I didn't know anymore. "Ben, he got a job," she said. I waited. "Oh, yeah, a real one." At the car rental place. At the airport." She said it flat, like a fact. It's a job. With insurance." The way she said insurance, like it was a foreign, exotic word she'd just discovered. No vision, no passion project, no youthful energy. Just a polyester uniform, a time clock, and a W-2. The real world. We're figuring it out, Mom," she said, and her voice cracked, just a little. This is really hard. The deposit on this apartment, it was everything. I'm looking for work, too. A receptionist. Anything. I listened. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't say, "That's what happens." I just listened. I was a nurse. I know how to just listen. "Anyway," she said, rushing to fill the silence, as if she was afraid I'd hang up. That's not the only reason I called. I mean, it is. I wanted to ask." She took a deep breath. Can I come see you? This weekend." My hand tightened on the phone. "See me." "Just me," she said, the words tumbling out, desperate. "Just me. Alone. Not Ben. He's working a double. He's always working. I'll take the bus. I'll be there for 1 hour. I want to see you. At your house. My house." I looked around my peaceful, quiet, clean living room. My eyes went down the hallway, past my locked bedroom door, to the other door. The guest room. The cozy one. The one they'd tried to banish me to. It was just a room. It was where I kept my old sewing machine and my boxes of photo albums. It had a nice bed, a clean yellow comforter, and a window that faced my climbing rose bushes. It was a lovely, perfectly nice guest room. "Of course, dear," I said, and I was surprised at how warm my own voice sounded, how easy it was. I heard her let out a breath, a tiny half-sob of air. Really, I said. "You're my daughter. The guest room is always ready for you. The daughter is always welcome. The guest is always welcome. The visionary who calls my memories junk. The CEO who tries to steal my pension, his invitation got lost in the mail." Chloe had finally learned the difference. She'd learned that contributions are real things, like a paycheck from a car rental agency. She'd learned that financial boundaries cut both ways. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, and this time I knew the tears were real. "Thank you." "I'll see you Saturday, honey," I said. "You take that bus. I'll make us some lunch. I still have that iced tea you like." I hung up the phone, and I walked down the hall, and I opened the door to the guest room. I went in and twisted open the window, letting the fresh, sunny air in. It was time to get it ready for my daughter. I closed the window in the guest room, the air crisp and clean, and straightened the yellow comforter. I walked back into my living room and looked toward the hallway. The master bedroom door was closed, still locked. And behind that door, Mark's reading glasses sat undisturbed on his nightstand. They were safe. I was safe. I had spent 60 days being stripped of my dignity, and it took 1 hour, 1 HOA binder, and 1 trip to the notary to get it all back. They had taught me that alignment meant power, and I showed them the ultimate alignment, the law. I had spent 40 years saving to be independent, and it took their arrogance for me to realize that the title to my home was useless if I didn't enforce the contract. I didn't stop being a mother. I just finally realized that my first, most important job was being an owner. Chloe and Ben are surviving. Ben has a steady paycheck now, and Chloe has stopped talking about passion projects. They learned the hard way that a W-2 is better than a vision. They learned that independence is earned with labor, not with laminated spreadsheets. I learned that the hardest emergency to triage is your own life. Sometimes you have to be cold, clinical, and precise. You have to look at the toxicity, make the cut, and seal the wound. My home is quiet now. It smells like my coffee and my rose bushes. It smells like peace. And it smells like mine. I reclaimed my house, and in doing so, I reclaimed myself. I was the lucky one. I had the CC&Rs, but my real strength wasn't in the binder. It was in finally having the courage to use the power I had earned. So let me ask you, if life handed you a brand new, unwritten page, a chance to enforce the contract on your own self-worth, would you have the courage to turn to it? If this story resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on boundaries, family, and Frank Rossetti. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the hardest of times. Big hugs, and I'll see you next time.